The garage had a name Marsh & Son Auto, though there was no son, only a daughter, and the sign had come with the lease, and Daniel had never bothered to change it. It sat on the corner of Ellery Street and 9th, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a Vietnamese restaurant, and it had the particular kind of unpretentious permanence that some small businesses achieve simply by lasting longer than anyone expected. The paint on the sign was faded. The concrete floor was oil-stained in the particular way that spoke of years of honest work rather than negligence. The tools on the wall were organized with the precision of someone who understood that a well-placed tool is the difference between a 10-minute job and a 40-minute one. Daniel Reeves had owned and operated the garage for 7 years. He was 43 years old, lean in the way that people who work with their hands tend to become lean, with a quiet face that defaulted to careful rather than cheerful, and hands that were always slightly stained no matter how thoroughly he washed them. His daughter, Claire, was 11, and she did her homework at the small desk in the back office every afternoon after school while he worked, and occasionally she would emerge to hand him a tool or hold a flashlight, because she had inherited his precise and practical orientation toward the world. It was a Wednesday afternoon in October when the black SUV pulled up. Daniel was underneath a 2015 pickup truck, assessing a transmission issue that the owner had described as a funny noise, and that was in reality a cracked flex plate, when he heard the bell above the garage door jingle. He heard heels on concrete, not work boots, not sneakers, heels and the specific cadence of a person who walks as though the floor should be grateful. He rolled out from under the truck. The woman standing in the entrance to his garage was dressed in the particular way of someone who is perpetually about to attend a meeting. Dark blazer, silk blouse, hair precise. She was looking around the garage with an expression that she had probably not calibrated as carefully as she imagined, because it was quite plainly an expression of distaste, the look of someone confronted with a reality they would prefer to have handled abstractly. Her name, he would learn later, was Renata Coles. She was the chief executive of a financial technology firm called Coles Capital Partners, a company she had built over 17 years from a 2-person advisory boutique into an organization with 400 employees and a valuation in the 9-figure range. She was, by every measure available to the world, extraordinarily successful. She was 44 years old, recently separated, and she drove a $70,000 SUV that was currently making a noise she did not understand. Behind her, slightly to her left, was a boy. He was 13, maybe 14 tall for his age, with his mother's bone structure and an expression that was quieter than teenagers usually wear. He was looking around the garage with the particular attention of a child who notices things, and when his eyes landed on Daniel, he went very still. Daniel noticed this. He filed it. "I need my car looked at," Renata Coles said, her eyes sweeping the garage in a way that managed to take inventory and find it wanting simultaneously. "The dealership is backed up for a week. My assistant said this place was recommended." "What's the issue?" Daniel asked. "There's a noise, like a grinding, but intermittent, when I accelerate from a stop." "How long has it been making it?" "A few days." "Has the check engine light come on?" "No." He nodded. "Pull it in. I'll take a look." She moved to do so. The boy stayed where he was, standing just inside the garage entrance, watching Daniel with that same particular stillness. Daniel looked at him. "You all right?" The boy blinked. "Yeah," he said. "Sorry." Something in the boy's voice was careful in a way that went beyond shyness. Daniel looked at him for a moment, then went to guide the SUV into the second bay. Renata Coles did not exit the vehicle gracefully. She got out and looked at the garage again, this time including the oil stains on the floor in her assessment. And then she looked at Daniel in his work shirt and said, "Is this going to take long?" "I have a 3 o'clock. Depends what I find," he said. "Well, just don't make it take longer than it needs to." He went to work. He did not respond to the comment, which was not because he had not heard it or had not registered its implication. He had heard it and registered it perfectly well. He simply did not find it productive to respond. The boy, his name was Owen, had drifted into the garage and was standing a few feet away, watching Daniel work with the same focused attention. After a few minutes, he said quietly, "Is it the caliper?" Daniel paused. He looked at the boy over his shoulder. "What made you think caliper?" he asked. Owen shrugged with the careful nonchalance of someone who has learned to minimize what they know in certain company. "The grinding from a stop. Sticking caliper on the front left, maybe." Daniel turned back to the wheel. He ran his hands along the brake assembly. "Front right," he said, "but close." Owen almost smiled. Renata Coles was typing on her phone near the garage entrance. She glanced over at her son. "Owen, don't hover." "He's not hovering," Daniel said, mildly. "He's observing. There's a difference." She looked at Daniel with an expression that suggested she was reassessing the nature of this interaction. Then she went back to her phone. Daniel removed the caliper. It was, as Owen had intuited, sticking seized on the slide pins, causing the pad to drag against the rotor on deceleration and acceleration both. He showed it to Owen, who crouched down to look at it with undisguised interest. "The slide pins need cleaning and re-greasing," Daniel said. "The caliper itself is salvageable. You've also got about 2 millimeters left on the front pads, so you'll want those replaced before winter." Owen nodded. "How do you know which one seize? Like, is there a pattern?" Daniel considered him. "Usually, it's a maintenance thing. Moisture gets in, the pins corrode. Cars that sit in certain climates, certain usage patterns." He paused. "You like cars?" "Mechanical things," Owen said. "Generally." "Your mom's?" Daniel asked, with a very slight inclination of his head toward where Renata was standing. Owen's expression shifted. Something complicated passed through it, very briefly. "Not really," he said. Daniel cleaned and re-greased the caliper, replaced the slide pins, and installed new front brake pads. He worked methodically, without rushing, checking each component as he went. Owen watched the whole process. At one point, Daniel handed him the torque wrench and talked him through the final sequence on the wheel bolts, which Owen executed with the focus of someone doing something that matters to them. When it was done, Daniel brought the car down from the lift and pulled it forward for a test. Renata was off her phone now. "How much?" $240, he said. She looked faintly surprised, as though she had expected more. She opened her bag and produced a card. While he processed the payment, she looked at Owen, who was still examining the caliper housing Daniel had set on the workbench, and said, "Let's go." Owen turned from the workbench. He looked at Daniel. There was something in his face that had been building since he walked in, some weight that Daniel had been aware of peripherally and had not pressed on, because he had learned over the years that pressing on things before they were ready to be pressed on was rarely productive. But Owen pressed on it himself. "Mom," he said. "That's him." Renata stopped. "That's who?" she said. Owen was looking at Daniel. His voice was very steady for a 14-year-old delivering something he had clearly been carrying for some time. "The accident," Owen said, "on Route 12, 2 years ago, the garage was very quiet." Daniel set the card reader down. Renata was looking at her son, then at Daniel, then back at her son, and her face had undergone the particular rapid reconstruction of a person who is receiving information that is reorganizing something fundamental. "Owen," he pulled me out, Owen said. "It was dark. The car was on its side and I was in the back seat, and I couldn't get the door open. And he stopped. And he came, and he pulled the door open. And he told me to keep my eyes open and stay with him while he got me out." He paused. "I've thought about it every day for 2 years. 2 years, 3 months, and approximately 11 days ago, Daniel Reeves had been driving home on Route 12 at 11:15 at night after dropping off a set of rebuilt brake components for a client. It had been raining. He had come around a long curve and seen a car on its side in the drainage ditch, its headlights still on, pointing at nothing. He had stopped without deciding to stop. He had been out of his truck before the thought fully formed. The car was a sedan, badly crumpled on the driver's side. The driver, a woman in her 40s, was unconscious but breathing. In the back seat, a boy of about 12 was trapped. The door jammed against the ditch wall, his face white in the darkness, his eyes going in and out of focus with the particular vacancy that Daniel associated with shock. He had used a tire iron to force the door, which had required 3 attempts and had taken approximately 4 minutes. And each of those minutes had required him to talk to the boy steadily, continuously, not allowing him to drift, keeping his eyes open and his attention anchored. "Stay with me. I'm right here. Tell me your name." "Good. Owen." "Good. Stay with me, Owen. Look at me. I'm right here." He had gotten the boy out. He had waited for the ambulance, which arrived 9 minutes later. He had given a brief statement to the responding officer. Then he had driven home, and Claire had been asleep, and he had sat at the kitchen table for 20 minutes before he went to bed. He had not told anyone about it, not because it was a secret, but because it did not feel like the kind of thing that required telling. He had stopped. He had helped. That was what a person did. He had not known the boy's name. He had not known his mother's name. The officer had taken his information, and the insurance company had sent a form letter that he had filed, and not thought much about. Now he looked at Owen Coles, who was 14 years old and standing in his garage with the weight of 2 years of remembered fear and remembered gratitude, and Daniel said, "I'm glad you're all right." Owen nodded. His jaw was tight in the way of a teenager trying not to show that something is affecting him. Renata Coles was completely still. She was a woman who processed the world through logic and preparation and the organized anticipation of outcomes. She had navigated hostile negotiations and boardroom crises and a marriage that had ended with the particular grinding damage of 2 ambitious people who had run out of room. She was not, by any measure, a woman who was frequently surprised. She was surprised. She looked at Daniel Reeves at his stained hands and his faded work shirt and his garage with its oil-stained floor and its modest, honest permanence, and the expression on her face was doing something she probably could not fully feel in real time, the way you cannot feel the temperature of water you have been submerged in long enough. "You never," she started. She stopped. "We tried to find you. Owen described you. The officer had your information. We sent a letter." "I got it," Daniel said. We wanted to thank you, properly." She paused. "Do something." He looked at her steadily. "I didn't stop for something." The words landed in the garage and stayed there. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had a quality it had not had when she walked in, something unguarded in it. "I know that," she said. She looked at her son. Owen was looking at the floor. She looked back at Daniel. "I was rude when I came in," she said. He did not deny it. "A little. I was." She seemed to be locating something. "I was condescending. I do that. I know I do it. It's a habit I have, of assessing places and deciding what they're worth before I've actually looked properly." Daniel picked up the card reader and completed the transaction. He handed her card back. "Your car's done," he said. "The caliper should be good for another 4 or 5 years if you keep up with the maintenance. Bring it in before winter to have the rears checked." She took the card. She did not move toward the door. "Can I do something for you?" she said. "I know you said you didn't stop for something, but I'd like to. If there's the shop, or if you need anything." "I'm all right," he said. "Your daughter," Owen said suddenly. They both looked at him. "You mentioned your daughter earlier. When I asked about the torque wrench, you said, 'My daughter asked me the same thing when she was 9. He paused. "Does she like mechanical things too?" Daniel looked at him. A small, genuine smile crossed his face. "She does. She's been known to rebuild a carburetor." Owen nodded seriously. "That's good." The late afternoon light was falling through the garage doors in long oblique bars, the kind of light that makes ordinary spaces look briefly like paintings. Renata Coles stood in it, holding her car key, looking at a man she had walked into a garage and looked down on approximately 40 minutes ago, and she was doing the particular quiet work of a person who has had their coordinates significantly adjusted. She opened her mouth to say something. He spoke first, gently. "Drive safe," he said. She closed her mouth, opened it again. "Thank you," she said. And this time it was not the thank you of a client to a mechanic. It was something else, bigger and older. "Thank you," Owen said. He said it the way you say something you have been saving for 2 years. They walked back to the SUV. Daniel watched them go. Owen turned once at the passenger door and looked back at the garage with an expression that Daniel recognized. It was the expression of someone fixing something in their memory, storing it carefully. Then they were gone. Daniel stood in the garage for a moment in the quiet. He went to the sink and washed his hands with the thorough ritual he had developed over 20 years of working on engines. He dried them on the shop towel. Claire appeared from the back office, 11 years old, textbook under her arm, with the specific alertness of a child who has been half listening to adult conversations from a distance and is now assessing the aftermath. "Who was that?" she asked. "Customers," he said. She studied him. "Something happened. The boy recognized me," he said. "From the accident on Route 12. Claire was still for a moment. She knew about the accident. She knew the shape of it. The middle of the night return home, the 20 minutes at the kitchen table. She was 9 then. She had noticed without being told. "Did he say anything?" she asked. "He said thank you," Daniel said. Claire looked at the garage door where the SUV had been. Then she looked back at her father. "Why didn't you ever tell them who you were?" she asked. "You had the information. You could have followed up." He pulled his work shirt straight and moved back toward the pickup truck, which still needed its flex plate replaced before 5 o'clock. "Some things don't need to be told," he said. Claire stood in the garage for a moment. thinking about this with the serious, careful thinking she brought to everything. Then she went back to her homework. And Daniel Reeves lay back down on the cold floor and slid underneath the truck and returned to the work, which was its own kind of answer to the world, steady and present and sufficient, doing what needed to be done, not because of what it would produce, but because of what it simply was. He closed the garage for the afternoon and drove to pick up Claire from school. She had a full day on Wednesdays, which meant she was waiting at the pickup circle with her backpack and the particular expression she wore when she had been thinking about something for 6 hours and was ready to discuss it. She climbed in, assessed him with a glance, and said, "Something happened. Customers came in this morning," he said. She fastened her seatbelt. "And?" The boy recognized me. "From the accident on Route 12. She was still for a moment. Claire had been 7 when the accident happened, old enough to remember the middle-of-the-night absence and the return home and the 20 minutes at the kitchen table that her father had spent alone before bed. She had not been told about it directly, but she had absorbed the shape of it the way children absorb things they are not supposed to know, through attention and proximity, and the particular intelligence of a child who has grown up in a household where her parents' moods were the weather she lived in. "What did he say?" she asked. "He said thank you," Daniel said. "He said he had been thinking about it for 2 years." Claire looked out the window at the October neighborhoods moving past. "Was his mother there?" she asked. "Yes." "What was she like?" He thought about this carefully, the way he thought about things he wanted to be accurate about. "She had come in expecting one thing," he said. "She left knowing something different. I think that will take her some time to work through." Claire considered this. "Is that okay? For her?" "I think so," he said. "People can usually find their way to the right place if the information gets to them. It just sometimes takes time." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Owen. Was that his name?" "Yes." "He recognized you? Just from seeing you?" "People remember the faces connected to things that matter to them," Daniel said. "He would have been 12. That age, you remember everything." "Do you remember him?" she asked. "I do," he said. He remembered the white face in the dark, the thin voice saying his name back when he asked for it, the way the boy had fixed his eyes on Daniel's face and held on the way you hold a rope in moving water. "I didn't know his name until today, but I remember his face." Claire seemed to process this. "Did you think about them?" she asked. "After? Did you wonder if he was okay?" He pulled into their street. "Yes," he said. "For a while. You wonder about the outcomes, but at some point you have to let the wondering go, because you did what you could do, and the rest isn't yours to hold." She thought about this with the serious, thoroughgoing thinking she brought to moral questions, which were her particular area of interest at 11 years old. She had read more philosophy than most adults Daniel knew, which was either a consequence of having a father who kept books on every surface or simply who she was. "But you could have followed up," she said. "You had the information. The officer took your contact details. The insurance company sent a letter. You could have found out." "I could have," he said. "Why didn't you?" He parked in front of the house. He turned off the engine and sat for a moment in the quiet of the car, with the garage visible through the windshield, its faded sign, and its honest oil-stained floor, and its pegboard of organized tools. "Because the help I gave was complete in itself," he said at last. "It didn't require a follow-up. It didn't need to become a story. I stopped and I helped and that was finished. If I had followed up, I would have changed what it was. It would have become something I was getting something from acknowledgement, or gratitude, or the good feeling of knowing I'd been recognized." He paused. "I didn't want it to be that." Claire looked at him. "But doesn't it feel good anyway?" she said. "Now that you know he's okay?" He thought about Owen's face in the garage, the 14-year-old who had been carrying a memory for 2 years, and had finally been able to set it down in the presence of the person it belonged to. "Yes," he said honestly. "It does." "Then maybe both things can be true," she said. "The help was complete in itself, and it also feels good to know the outcome. You don't have to choose." He looked at his daughter. She was 11 years old. She was right. "Maybe so," he said. They went inside. He made dinner while she set the table and told him about her day, a disagreement in history class about the motivations of a particular historical figure, a lunch table conversation that had gotten philosophically complicated, a book she had started that she was not sure she liked but could not stop reading. The ordinary abundance of an 11-year-old's Tuesday. After dinner, while she was doing her homework at the kitchen table, he went back to the garage and finished the flex plate on the pickup truck. He worked in the quiet of the evening, the radio on low, his hands steady on the work. The garage smelled of oil and cold concrete, and the faint ghost of autumn coming through the open side door. He thought about Renata Coles driving home in a car that would no longer grind on deceleration, in a city that was the same city it had been this morning, and also in the specific geometry of what had happened in a garage on Ellery Street, slightly rearranged. He thought about Owen in the passenger seat, holding a piece of the past that had finally found its proper place. He thought about Diane, who had been gone for 4 years, and Claire, who was 11 and already more of herself than most adults managed to be, and the garage that had been named for a son who did not exist, but had turned out to be something better and more specific. He thought about the fact that the things you do without expectation of return have a way of finding you anyway, eventually, not as payment but as confirmation. Not because the world is just, but because people remember. People carry things. And sometimes, 11 months or 2 years or 4 years later, they find you in a garage on a Wednesday afternoon, and they look at you with recognition, and they tell you what you meant to them. It was not something you could plan for. It was not something you needed to plan for. He finished the flex plate. He checked the torque on the transmission housing. He ran the engine for 2 minutes and listened to it run clean and quiet. No grinding, no irregularity, nothing but the reliable sound of something working correctly. He turned off the engine. He turned off the lights. He went inside. He thought, too, about the nature of recognition. The word had 2 meanings that he had always found interesting in their overlap. To recognize someone was to see them accurately to register who they actually were, rather than who your first impression suggested. And to recognize something was to acknowledge its value, to say, this matters, this counts, this is real. Renata Coles had come into his garage and not recognized him, not in either sense. She had seen the faded sign, and the oil-stained floor, and the man in the work shirt, and she had assembled a complete picture from those elements, efficient and conclusive, the way successful people assemble pictures of the world, quickly, with confidence, from the available data. The picture she had assembled was not wrong exactly. He was a mechanic in a modest garage, which was true, but it was incomplete in the way that all quick pictures are incomplete, because it contained no room for what lay underneath the surface information. And then her son had looked across the garage and seen his face, and the picture had come undone. There was something instructive in that, Daniel thought, though he was careful about drawing large lessons from specific events. The specific event was specific. A woman who had been dismissive had discovered a reason to revise her dismissal. This happened. People got new information and updated themselves. This was not unusual or particularly profound. What was perhaps more interesting was Owen, the 14-year-old who had been carrying a face and a voice and a set of remembered words for 2 years and had finally been able to place them. Keep your eyes open. Stay with me. Simple instructions, the kind you give to someone in shock, the kind that are about presence rather than content. He had given Owen something to hold on to in the dark, and Owen had held on to it. And here they were on a Wednesday afternoon in October 2 years later, and the holding on had mattered. He was not sure what to do with that, except to let it be what it was. He finished the flex plate. He tested the engine. He turned off the lights and locked up and went inside to his daughter, who had finished her homework and was reading at the kitchen table with the focused absorption of a child in the middle of a book that has captured her entirely. He made tea. He sat across from her and did not interrupt the reading, because interrupting Claire when she was in a book was like interrupting a person in the middle of a sentence technically possible, not something you wanted to do without cause. After a while, she put the book down and looked at him. You seem different, she said. Different how? She considered. Like something settled. He thought about this. Maybe something did, he said. She nodded, accepting this. She picked up her book again. He drank his tea. The October evening pressed against the windows, and the garage was dark and quiet on the other side of the backyard. And the day had been what the day had been, which was, in the final accounting, more than enough. In the weeks that followed, Renata Coles brought the SUV back in for the rear brake check he had recommended before winter. She did not make appointments through an assistant. She called the shop directly and spoke to Daniel, and she did not make conversation about business or networking or any of the other things that a CEO might instinctively reach for when dealing with a person they had recently discovered they had misjudged. She asked when would be convenient. She thanked him when the work was done. Owen came with her the second time, and the third. He had questions about differentials, about valve timing, about the logic of hydraulic systems. Daniel answered them without condescension. the way he answered Claire's questions, which was to say, completely, with the assumption that the person asking was capable of understanding the answer if it was given well. Owen was capable. He was more than capable. He had the specific combination of spatial reasoning and patience that good mechanical work requires, and Daniel found that he enjoyed explaining things to him the way he enjoyed explaining things to Claire, not as a teacher performing for a student, but as one person sharing with another person something they both found genuinely interesting. He did not make anything large of this. He did not offer mentorship or make speeches about potential. He simply answered the questions and demonstrated the work, and let Owen decide what he wanted to do with it, which, it turned out, was to come back. Claire found out about Owen, eventually she found out about most things eventually, and declared, with 11-year-old certainty, that it was obvious he was going to be an engineer. Maybe, Daniel said. Definitely, she said, with the confidence of someone who had already run the numbers. He let her have it. She was probably right. She usually was. And the garage on Ellery Street continued its work, the steady, ordinary, unspectacular work of fixing the things that needed fixing, one car at a time, in the particular reliable way that some small enterprises manage to sustain across years and through seasons, and past all the larger and more dramatic enterprises that rise and fall on either side of them. Honest work, modest sign, oil-stained floor, everything necessary, nothing extra, exactly what it needed to be. There was a moment, about 3 weeks after the Wednesday in October, that Daniel thought about for a long time afterward. He was closing the garage for the evening when a car pulled up, not the black SUV, but a smaller car, a sensible sedan, and Owen got out alone. He was in school clothes, backpack on one shoulder, and he looked uncertain in the particular way of a teenager who has decided to do something they are not entirely sure is appropriate. "My mom doesn't know I'm here," Owen said. Daniel leaned against the garage door. "All right, I wanted to. I had more questions, about the differential, and about." He stopped. "I was also just wondering if it was okay to come by sometimes, not to have something fixed, just to watch, or ask things." Daniel looked at the boy. 14, tall, with that same careful attention he had noticed on the first day. The kind of attention that does not switch off. "The shop's open Monday through Saturday, 9 to 5, Daniel said. "If you're here, you work. You don't stand around watching. You hold the light, you pass the tools, you do what needs doing, and you ask as many questions as you want." Owen was still for a moment. "Yeah?" he said. "Yeah," Daniel said. Owen's expression did something that a 14-year-old would not want anyone to see, and that Daniel carefully did not acknowledge. "I'll come Saturday," Owen said. 9 o'clock, Daniel said. "Don't be late." Owen was not late. He showed up at 8:53, which Daniel noted and approved of, and he worked without complaint for 5 hours, handing tools and holding lights and asking questions in the steady, unself-conscious way of someone for whom the questions are more important than how the questions make them look. He had good hands. He had patience. He had the ability to be still and observe before he acted, which was the most important thing and the hardest to teach. At 2 in the afternoon, Daniel sent him home with $20, which Owen tried to refuse and Daniel declined to accept the refusal of. "You worked," Daniel said. "You get paid." Owen put the $20 in his pocket. He stood at the garage entrance with the backpack on his shoulder. "Same time next week?" he said. "Same time next week," Daniel said. Claire found out the following Monday when she came by after school and found Owen in the garage, helping Daniel reassemble a carburetor. She looked at Owen. She looked at the carburetor. She looked at her father with the expression of someone who has arrived at the scene of a development that does not surprise them. "He's the boy from the accident," she said. "Yes," Daniel said. "I knew it," she said, with 11-year-old satisfaction, and dropped her backpack on the desk and came to look at the carburetor. Owen looked at her. "How did you know?" "Dad doesn't just let people come into the shop," she said. "Only people he thinks are worth teaching." She picked up a small component and looked at it. "So either you asked him very good questions, or something else happened." "Both," Owen said. She seemed to approve of this answer. She put the component down. "I'm Claire," she said. "Owen," he said. "I know," she said, and turned to her father. "Can I stay and help? Do you have homework? I can do it after." "Then you can stay," he said. The three of them worked on the carburetor until 5 o'clock, when Daniel declared the work done and the shop closed, and he locked up and walked Claire home, and Owen walked in the opposite direction toward the bus stop. and the October evening was settling into the kind of cold that reminds you that winter is not far. He thought about Renata Coles and what she was doing that evening, whether she was in a meeting, or reviewing a report, or doing the particular relentless work of running a company that she had built over 17 years for nothing. He thought about whether the conversation in his garage had changed anything fundamental in her, or whether it had been one of the things that happen in a life and are absorbed and processed and eventually become part of the background sediment rather than the active surface. He did not know. He was not sure it was his to know. What he knew was that Owen came in on Saturdays and asked good questions and had better hands than most adult mechanics he had worked with, and that Claire had declared with absolute certainty that Owen was going to be an engineer, and that the garage on Ellery Street was, this October, and presumably next, still open and still doing its work. He thought that was enough. He thought it was considerably more than enough. Actually, this ordinary persistent life, this work that asked to be done well and rewarded the asking, this daughter who packed his lunch and read philosophy at the kitchen table, this boy who showed up 8 minutes early because he had been taught by someone, or had simply understood on his own that being on time was the first thing you gave to work you respected. He thought about the accident on Route 12, and the moment when he had pulled Owen from the car in the dark and the rain, the moment before the calculating mind had a chance to weigh anything, when it had simply been one person and another person and a door that needed to be opened, and the question of whether to stop was not actually a question at all. He had not done it for recognition. He had not done it for Owen's gratitude, or Renata Coles's apology, or the Saturday mornings that followed. He had done it because a child was in a car in a ditch in the dark, and he was there, and that was the full extent of the calculation. But he was glad now for all of it. For the Wednesday afternoon and the garage and the look on Owen's face when the recognition landed. For Claire's verdict on Owen's engineering future. For the $20 that Owen had tried to refuse. For the October evening and the carburetor and the three of them working in the late afternoon light until the work was done. He was glad. It did not change why he had stopped on Route 12. Nothing could change that. Because what you did in the dark for nothing was the most accurate measure of who you actually were. And he was glad to have been, in that one specific dark moment, the person he believed himself to be. But he was glad, and that was allowed.